Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel Brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Richard Siegel and I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
Pretty darn good big brother right here too.
Thanks.
And we thank you for joining us. This is our weekly opportunity, 7 o'clock on Fridays on the East Coast time, to talk about all things sexual.
Yes, indeed. And there's certainly no shortage of things to talk about.
Right? We encourage, of course, people to talk about sex all the time. One of the things we'll talk about tonight under the heading of developmental sexuality or sexual development, dads and daughters.
Yep.
There should be no such thing as the talk, like so many people, especially of our generation and back, grew up with. And it's one of the easiest things for parents to do if they accept their natural role as sexuality educators of their children, to make it an ongoing, lifelong conversation.
Well, on paper.
Age and stage appropriate sex ed is not one conversation when too little too late.
Absolutely. And
Right.
you're the whole idea that there is no the talk kind of thing. It is a process. It is a lifelong thing. But, unfortunately, it's not natural. It's not natural for people. We have a legacy of not talking about kids. There's a reason why here in the United States...
Talking about sex with kids.
I'm sorry, sex with kids. There's a reason why we have probably the highest level of everything that can go wrong with sex and sexuality here in the U.S., and a lot of it has to do with that refusal to acknowledge that sex and sexuality are natural, integral part of our humanity.
Right. How can it's just another of the astonishing frustrations that drives our work. How can we be so okay with being among the sexually unhealthiest countries in the so-called developed world?
Right.
Why does
Right.
Americans just seem to be fine?
Well,
For the
again,
most part.
part of the orientation that most of us have as Americans. I mean, not that we have that, but it's the American characterization that sex is something we do. Sexuality is some kind of arbitrarily moralized kind of behavior, as opposed to something we are, which is, again, part of our core. And as long as we do make that mistake and continue to perpetuate that, what we're doing is forcing people to disconnect from themselves and disconnect from their sexuality.
Kids don't notice if parents continually avoid talking about sexual things they see on television or on billboards on the way to school, and for years we've talked about the sources of information for kids. And
That's right. That's right.
Not to sound like cranky old pops and grandpops, but the number one source of information about sex for teenage girls probably ought not be teenage boys.
Right.
No offense, fellas. Don't
Right.
mean to sell us out.
Exactly.
Right?
No, but I honestly, it is the one group of people that probably hands down knows the least about sex and sexuality, and anything
always
they're
have the
trying
best-
to say has got an agenda to it.
Right. So, as we usually like to start our show, we'll take a little look at sex in the news.
So, what's our first item?
Well, an interesting article called "Why Asian Americans Need Better Sex Ed." And interesting title, but again, not really anything that's news to anybody working in the field. This was a particular review highlighting the ways this study was specific to Asian and Pacific Islander American communities. But Black and Indigenous and people of color across the board have historically not had the same access, not just to sexual and reproductive health services, but information and education.
Absolutely. And, you know, with everything that's going on right now, with not only all of the COVID stuff, but when we look at what's happening with all the protests, and when we look at, I think, where we are, and it's so gratifying to see so many people out on the streets peacefully protesting, really flying that banner of Black Lives Matter. Because for so long with authorities, it really hasn't, you know, and this trope that a lot of people try to use to minimize this, saying, all lives matter. You know, it is not about one over another. It is about one group of people that really have been marginalized, one group of people that really have been abused, one group of people that truly has been left out of the mainstream of not only ours but most societies. So I think this article and this issue is not just about Asian Americans and sex ed. It is cultural competence across the board. And part of how a lot of communities of color have been marginalized is by denying them access to sexuality education, denying them access to reproductive health services, denying them the opportunity to sort of have the kind of conversations that a lot of white America has been able to afford to have. So, you know, when we talk about all of these issues that are going on right now, you know, they're all interconnected. You know, we've been making a point since we've started this show of looking at sexual health and looking at sexuality education as an issue of social justice as much as an issue of education and health.
Absolutely.
And this is a perfect example.
We will not have equality. We will not have women truly having a place at life's table. We will not have equity unless we have sexual health.
That's right. That's right. And I think all of us that do this work, no matter how well-meaning we are, no matter how long we've been doing this, no matter how liberal we may like to think we are, we all have to do a better job at being more culturally competent. You know, it's not enough to just throw condoms at the issue and talking about adolescent pregnancy. We have to talk about culture that's a part of that as well. Because if we're talking about talking with parents and we're talking about all of these kinds of issues that we've been talking about for so long, and it's so frustrating even just speaking of it now, that we just haven't seemed to done a very good job on that part of it. Right? So I think all of us really need to sort of do a little check and really look at our own aspect of how we are being culturally sensitive, right? Much less competent. I'd like people to be sexually competent. I'd like people to be competent in how they're able to teach, but we also have to have the competency to be sensitive to the different cultural needs.
Right. And the comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Let's drink apple sake to that.
Yes, indeed. This week, sake is
Cheers.
apple sake. So, our next news item.
It is kind of a follow-up to something we mentioned last week, how the Trump administration has been attempting to use the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to limit women's access to abortion by claiming that it's elective, and since elective procedures aren't happening in most hospitals,
That's right. That's
tough.
right. And again, another little slick way that they're trying to do it, not just forbidding women from going to health facilities, but especially now in this age of telemedicine and telehealth, a lot of women have been seeing their doctors online, and many doctors have been prescribing what we refer to as medical or medication abortion.
Right.
Primarily with the medication mifepristone, the pill, and women are getting their exam, they're talking with their physicians, and their physicians are prescribing this directly to the patients as they do any other medication.
And I was going to say, just like for quite some years now, men can go online and talk to a doctor and get a script for Viagra.
That's right. And in those cases, they can talk to a doctor sight unseen. A lot of times it's just filling out a form.
You don't really
online.
have to be examined to
exactly.
Diagnose.
So we're talking about women who are really
Right.
doing it right, yet the FDA has a rule that women can only go to a hospital or designated healthcare facility in order to get this medication. So
this is a lawsuit.
Yes.
Right?
The ACLU and I think representing
the good old
ACOG.
ACLU and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists are demanding that an emergency order lift regulations, these things that prevent access for women.
Exactly.
And hopefully that will go well.
Yeah. And again, it's not about safety. It is not about any of that stuff that they would like to think it is about, or like us to believe that they're concerned about. It really is.
Nonsense.
It really is. So
Always under the ruse of we're so concerned about women's health.
Right.
That an abortion clinic has to have hallways wide enough for two gurneys to pass each other, just like a hospital, because it's so dangerous. There's constantly ambulances running back and forth, and
yeah. And one quick follow-up to that. Another issue that's been going on as well is apparently there are these anti-choice groups that are out there that have been trying to sell women.
Making up silly nonsense?
Absolutely. Yeah, go figure.
Imagínate eso.
Basically making up this idea that women can reverse a medical abortion. If a woman has already taken these pills and already taken the mifepristone, they're trying to convince these women that if they just load themselves up with progesterone, that they can reverse the effect of medication abortion. And let's just be very clear, there's another lawsuit trying to get the FDA to prevent them from doing that. It is nonsense, and it just endangers women.
I'm Rachel Needle, co-director of Modern Sex Therapy Institutes. And Modern Sex Therapy Institutes is a continuing education provider. We provide continuing education for medical and mental health professionals around the world. And we have over 140 archived workshops on our website, so please check them out at www.modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. Also, we have a number of certification programs, including sex therapy, couples in sex therapy, LGBTQIA affirmative therapy, alternative relationships, transgender mental health care, medical sexology, sex education, and sex counselor certifications. In addition, we offer a PhD in clinical sexology. So please, again, go to our website, check out everything that we have to offer. A lot of our stuff is available solely online from the convenience of your own home or office. We do things live in 8 states and live via webinar as well.
Okay, well, we are very excited tonight because, we've been waiting a long time to bring this topic back around. And, of course,
indeed.
being Father's Day this weekend, I'm wearing my Father's Day tie. I want everybody to see from when my baby girl was literally a baby girl. I don't think she went out and bought it. I think her mom had something to do with it. But to all the dads, Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
And in particular, a favorite topic of ours has to do with dads of daughters.
Yeah.
So many years ago in our old Planned Parenthood days, and for several years running, we did a program, an original program called Daddy's Little Girl, the role of fathers in the healthy sexual development of their daughters. And it's a mouthful.
It is, but
it's an important concept.
Right, and we are bringing it back, and we've got some wonderful
hoped.
people lined up. We're planning right now.
Right.
Where we
Obviously,
are
the
going to have it
pandemic,
out there.
like everything else,
Right.
has shifted our plans, but it will probably be in July instead of the Friday before Father's Day, as historically it's been.
Right. But it's something we definitely need to talk about, and it's something people, I think, have to, just really spend a little more time considering.
Right.
Because I think we've been a little too casual about a father's role, particularly in their daughter's life. We're going on 50 years worth of data and research. And very rarely do you see overwhelmingly consistent kinds of data coming out of any given studies that are happening all over the world. And it is remarkably consistent. And what now 50 years of data is really showing us is that not only are fathers so vitally important in their daughter's life, but in many cases, and don't take this as an insult, nothing personal, Mom, but in many cases, the role and impact of dad's presence is more significant on the positive impact or negative impact of their daughter's development.
Well, since we've been doing this show, we've talked about how our theme just organically emerged, which clearly makes sense with the context of two dudes who happen to be brothers, who happen to be in the same line of work, that this theme would emerge, that most, if not all, of the sexual health, wellness, and lack of sexual health problems that we talk about, that society deals with, have some major involvement with men. Men cause pregnancies, particularly unintended ones. Men commit the majority of sexual assaults and sexual violence against women. So why wouldn't it make sense that when it comes to sex ed and raising sexually literate and confident kids, that dad's role wouldn't be huge? But just like we always say, if men hear sexual and reproductive health and think, oh, that's ladies' plumbing stuff, and excuse themselves from the conversation, well, then the same thing is likely to be true when daddy's little girl, which is really safe and sexless, starts to hit puberty and becomes a young woman, and dad starts very often freaking out and doesn't even want to touch his daughter anymore because his back is tight and, oh my God, she has boobs. And, so how often have we seen this right at that critical age where daughters are moving towards their dads even more, and their dads are backing up.
Right, and you're talking especially at that age around puberty and adolescence, and then that's worth but that's also worth repeating that as a girl's body is starting to change, and with all the other processes that she's going through and all the other changes that are happening in her, this is when girls are actually reaching out and needing to connect with their fathers the most, and that is when so many fathers disconnect.
Yeah, what freaks dads out more than anything than his daughter's first period? And how often...
Her breasts?
Well, but how often does that first period happen and dad goes, whoop, that's mom's department, and I'm jumping in the back seat for this one.
And if you're a good dad, you can talk to your daughter about that too.
Right. I mean, even in general, why do guys freak out about buying tampons?
Right.
Do
they really think that somebody would think it's for them?
Right. What possible use could they have?
Well, there's a few we can think of, but
we talked about kinks last week.
Yeah, exactly. And those of you who may be in fraternities, you probably know some other uses for them as well.
Sure.
But yeah, it's part of that ridiculousness. Yeah. And it starts in the very beginning. We also look at the way we are all raising children. What is it that people really want to know? Why do people get so invested in wanting to know the sex of a child before it's born?
Gender reveal parties.
Yeah, exactly. And all that really is about pretty much perpetuating these ridiculous gender stereotypes. It's the pinking of the girls,
right,
and the bluing of the boys.
Which I read an interesting thing online that said in England back in the 1600s, 1700s, pink was actually a boy's color. Just go figure. Social customs change, but some things don't change. And when you think about things like how women learn to be treated by men, right? Right. By how they're treated by the men in their lives, their brothers, their fathers, their uncles, and by their observing how their moms are treated, how their grandmoms and aunts and sisters are treated by the men in their lives. That's a powerful sex ed.
It really is. And we know, and again, the data is clear on this, that when fathers are present in their daughters' lives and they're engaged and they're positive and affirming of their daughters and what their daughters are going through, and just them
Right.
as people. We have a whole bunch of incredibly wonderful outcomes.
But I just want to add to when you say when fathers are present, don't think that that doesn't include divorced guys who might not see their kids all the time. You can still be present in your kids'
Oh,
lives.
absolutely. You don't have to
Even-
live together to be
right,
present.
even if you just see them on weekends. Or,
True. Good point. But we know that when girls have those kinds of fathers, they have much greater self-esteem. They have a much higher level of self-reliance and personal confidence.
Let's go back to where this came from. A lot of this stuff, a lot of these gender roles, and yeah, it's a cliche, but this old image of the daughter upstairs on the second floor of the house, and the young man sniffing around, who's clearly intent on getting something off of her, and the dad pacing back and forth on the porch with a shotgun. Right? That the message is, well, there's so many messages there. That again, the young man who may be interested in a friendship or an intimate relationship with the daughter, no, he's a predator. He has to be stopped at all costs because he's dangerous. He's probably going to rape her. And the message about the daughter is she's an idiot and completely incapable of defending herself. So dad has to rely on even deadly force if necessary to protect his daughter's virtue. How insane is that, to think that's how we raise boys and girls? Meanwhile, a lot of those same dads are waiting up with the high five at the ready when their 16-year-old son comes home and tells them they got some for the first time. Oh, dad's proud. No, that's my man. High five. But daughters need to be locked in their room until they're 30.
Right.
It's
And again, that starts right from the very, very beginning. The way dads
the little
touch,
Fabergé egg.
right? That's right. The way guys touch their kids. They handle boys more roughly. Boys can toss them around and throw them around, but girls they have to treat so fragilely. Again, the pink things, the quote girly things
Frilly.
that girls are inundated with before they have any understanding of all of this stuff. So we keep inculcating them in these ridiculous stereotypes and these unnecessary and arbitrary gender-typed designations.
And as we like to say in the sexology field, sometimes it seems like California is a foreign country, a strange foreign land. But is the answer what some of the Northern California types are, raising babies and
No.
insisting on no acknowledgement of gender, telling the preschool workers, please, if you change the diaper, we would appreciate it if you not call any attention to their genitals because we're raising a genderless child.
Right. I think that's just another side of discomfort in those parents. I think they're thinking they're being hip and liberal and progressive and all that, but I think they just are scared to death and they don't know how to parent. And it really comes down to that because that's even more confusing for a lot of these kids.
Yeah.
All right. So going back to these benefits of fathers being in their daughter's life, there's a more positive body image that they have. They're more comfortable with their sexuality. They're more comfortable with their femininity, however that fits on their own personal spectrum.
Right.
They have greater life satisfaction. They tend to do better in school and have greater satisfaction with their careers.
And the best part of all is they generally delay sexual debut,
Right.
and when they get into relationships, generally they're healthier and more mature
That's right.
relationships.
That's right. And that's kind of across the board. Their intimate and romantic relationships, as well as all their peer relationships, do tend to be healthier. They do tend to be more effective relationships.
And where do you think they learn that stuff?
And of course we know that when fathers are not engaged in their daughters' lives, they're not present, they could be abusive or just absent. We know that, again, these are generalities when we look at, these are kind of group types of data, but we know that these girls tend to be more likely to grow up feeling less confident. They don't have that kind of self-reliance. They tend to have troublesome and oftentimes negative peer relationships, and when it comes to their intimate and romantic / sexual relationships, they often are abusive. They do often have difficulty emotionally connecting, particularly with men. And these don't have to be heterosexual relationships to see where that can come into play as well.
Right.
We look at an issue of, you had kind of mentioned this already, this precocious sexual involvement, that girls that don't have that relationship with their dads, and they don't have that kind of male involvement, they get involved sexually earlier, and they're more likely, way more likely to experience teen pregnancy, to get a sexually transmitted infection.
And again, at the risk of sounding old farty, there's something about daddy issues that, girls who are lacking that will seek it out consciously or otherwise, and often in relationships, or get the message that sexual connection is a really good substitute for that kind of intimacy that they're craving.
Right, which also opens them up to levels of intimate partner violence and relationship violence. This is something that people are not talking about, that they really need to, because we are seeing levels of relationship violence in adolescents that we have never seen before.
Yeah.
Right? Never ever seen before. So they're all connected.
And the same old cliches about education and development.
Right.
We know that girls mature more quickly than boys in just about every area nowadays, even the math and engineering and sciences that boys used to excel at. Girls mature more quickly than boys pretty much across the board, except in the one area that tends to get them in trouble. And that's the kind of fantasy thinking about sex and intimacy. And I could already hear the groans from some of our progressive female friends and associates. But I think that girls are still vulnerable to being manipulated.
Yes.
Remember that old line from Mo Better Blues, right? I'll love you forever tonight. And
That's right.
There's that same kind of setup for
That's exactly
abuse.
right. That's exactly, and it's again, it just makes these girls just too easily manipulated, and make them open for that. So when we talk about looking at the impact of fathers on sexual and reproductive health specifically, again, all kinds of important benefits that come from that as well.
Right. Body image acceptance, again, delayed debut of sexual having sex.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, girls that are connected to their father, that have that involved, engaged father, are going to, in general, engage in sexual activity much later. When they do, there's also going to be greater likelihood of being safe and protected, and having that father there with that shotgun, having that image there, knowing that there's accountability to a father is also a protective factor.
Right, but from a relationship built on trust and mutual respect, because all, as we're saying this, I just cannot not mention how thoroughly creeped out I am by these usually religious,
I know where you're going,
dad and daughter ritual dances, where girls pledge their virginity to the, that's
these
so
abstinence
creepy.
proms, these abstinence balls.
They actually have like a marriage ceremony of sorts.
It is very much like a wedding ceremony.
Where they exchange rings, and dad holds the gross. Right. Dad's gonna hold the daughter's virginity.
Yeah, Dad, let go of her virginity.
Like that rapper that made the news.
Was it T.I.?
Crazy and taking his daughter to the doctor every 6 weeks for a hymen exam to make sure she's still a virgin.
By the way, you're an idiot. Just so we're clear on that. That is, I think, boorish. That is prehistoric, and it's just nothing accurate.
And tells your daughter that you absolutely no trust.
No trust whatsoever.
No faith in her ability to make her
So I want to focus on 2 points here. One, not only the delayed sexual involvement for girls that are connected to their daughters, but also
Dads.
girls that, dads, thank you, but also the fact that girls that have that connection with their dads experience puberty later. It's a slight delay in how they experience puberty, as opposed to girls that have absent fathers or father
Earlier
figures,
puberty.
much earlier onset puberty. Right? Now, there's there's no explanation of it. People have been going out of their way, but I think we can call it sort of the scent of a father sort of thing.
Well,
the
yeah,
pheromones.
it's like those. It's long been known that when women live together, they tend to sync up their menstrual cycles.
That's right.
Because of these hormonal influences.
That's right.
And there are those studies. People have long denied that pheromones are very active in humans, but those fascinating studies where
have suggestion.
Women smell the armpits of T-shirts of
That's
their
right.
husbands.
They can pick out their shirt.
No, they're not only that, but they're more or less attracted to the smell the nearer or further from their ovulation.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
And
we're still driven on an
very much so.
evolutionary basis by hormones.
Very
and
much so.
Brain chemicals.
We also know that after childbirth is a very common thing in relationships, right? Because sometimes toward the end of a pregnancy, women are not often feeling sexual when they first give birth. We know women are wired from being
a week or so
the mother.
ago.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that idea of just having a guy who may be pressuring you, to
hold the
be
baby,
hold the
right?
baby, it has a hormonal effect. So it stands to reason that the presence of an engaged father in this girl's life, there's going to be some sort of pheromonal effect that seems to delay her puberty.
Fascinating.
So it really is. It's one of those things where the body seems to know what's going on, even if the person doesn't. All right. There's also been some data to suggest that a father being present affects brain development, which people have also used in sort of socio-biological circles to explain why maybe there is such a difference in girls who don't have that father and they don't have that engaged male, do have higher rates of what are called delinquent behaviors.
You're still using that word, delinquent?
They still are using that term delinquent. We can go delinquent or problematic.
Yeah.
Right? Either way. So we know that there is a difference. We know that dads matter. And one of the most important things that a father can offer the daughter, and it's not just being there, but it's that affirmation. And I think that's really one of the most important aspects of dad's role, is to really be there to affirm the being of this girl. Not as a little princess. I don't really like that. I saw a great shirt not long ago. It says, "I am not my daddy's little princess. I'm my daddy's strong, capable little girl."
Nice.
And I really, really dug
I've
that.
been very pleased to see commercials running on TV lately, like those The More You Know public service announcements, where a guy says to the camera, we wouldn't tolerate gender discrimination in the workplace or at school. Why in our own homes?
That's right.
And the tagline is, raise your daughters the same way you raise your sons.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think dads have to hear a lot more. And moms do too, because a lot of this is also, oftentimes moms are gatekeepers.
Right.
All right. So, both have that responsibility, especially if both are present, to make sure that dad has that kind of access. And that's such a big one. Again, we mentioned it earlier. I'm going to talk about this as one of the first tips that we talk about because it's worth repeating. This idea that dads need to be physical with their daughters. It's really important. And it's a great lesson for girls to see their fathers modeling this really positive, healthy, emotional, and physical affection.
Right. Remember, physical intimacy is not the same thing as sexual intimacy.
That's right.
And a physically intimate relationship is important.
That's right.
A sexually intimate relationship with kids is creepy and incestuous and illegal.
Exactly. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about physical,
loving,
affectionate intimacy.
Comfortable touch.
Yes.
Right? Feeding that skin hunger.
Right.
Is a very, very important, healthy part.
No matter how old your daughter is, guys, you should never, ever balk at hugging her.
especially if it's like so on the mark with puberty. That like, oh, this happened, so I can't touch you anymore the same way. We don't need to plant those kind of messages either.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Compliment your daughters on the things they do, their talents, their accomplishments, not
Their character.
their looks.
Right.
Right? There's still that sexist difference in emphasizing how girls look instead
Right.
of
Right.
the things they're good at or the things they do.
And who better to teach that girl and model for that girl that it's not about looks and that's not what she should be trying to use to get her way. That she's got strengths, she's got ability, she's got talents all on her own.
Yeah. And it's always a great opportunity for dads to learn more about female sexuality and maybe improve their relationships with their kids' moms too.
That'd be a nice side effect.
Right. So that's going to do it for us for this week. Please stay tuned for information about how you can participate in Daddy's Little Girl, a program for fathers and the healthy sexual development, the role of fathers.
The role of fathers in the healthy sexual development of their daughters, indeed.
Right.
And please feel free, get a hold of us either through the YouTube channel or through Facebook. Let us know what you think about all of this. Let us know what maybe your experience is. If you are a guy and you had a daughter, has that changed your life at all? I mean, not that not having a kid, will change your life, but does it change your view of yourself as a man?
Yes, it
does.
does.
It change the way you look at women?
I'm thinking of lots of guys we know that have had daughters in the last 10 to 15 years. And I would love to talk to them about how it changes their view of women in general.
Right.
Especially when they realize there aren't two kinds of women, like the wise guys on The Sopranos.
Exactly.
The wife you marry and have kids with, and then the good time girl that you keep in an apartment downtown. No, there's only one kind of women.
That's right.
And there are girlfriends and wives and daughters and mothers and grandmothers and sisters and aunts and friends.
And people.
And people.
Right? Bottom line.
So we would be grateful if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel and liberally hit the like and share buttons on our Facebook page and help us spread the word and grow our audience, because everyone needs to be talking about sex and healthy sexuality and positively about sex.
Indeed. So thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your week. Have
Happy
a happy Father's Day.
Dads.
Yes, indeed.
And we'll see you next Friday and every Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Stay safe.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.